Everybody, it's the Mad Master here. I'm doing a new video series, and this is inspired by my friend who told me to tell more stories about my life and some of these interesting things that have happened so far. So, this video series is entitled Tales from the Anti-Metal 90s. I decided to do this yesterday. And the first video is going to cover the years 1990 and 1991, ostensibly. I could do 1989, but that wasn't the 90s, but that was when I first got into metal. Because of the tape version of this, I could do a little bit of a precursor to, no, I'm not going to throw it. It was actually like $10, Live After Death. So, what happened? Well, I was kind of raised to, not to look down on metal, but, there was a lot of peer pressure back then. Metal was kind of seen as this thing that was like degenerate or delinquent kind of people listened to. And it wasn't really what it became later for a lot of people, but some familial forces that were of that opinion as well. But just I guess a precursor to what this video series is going to be covering, because I'll go through all the years. But 1989, what happened was, I was a little kid, preteen, actually before preteen, but I won't say my age. I was only one. No, I'm just kidding. I wish I was only one in 1989. But so what happened was my father, my parents were divorced, and I'd see my father on the weekends, and I had this weird half brother that was had some different types of musical tastes and different kind of lifestyles than a lot of people, of course, at the time. But he was my older half brother, and my father, I'd stay with my dad for the weekend or Saturdays or whatever. My brother was living there for a while because he was kind of otherwise he was in a lot of foster homes and stuff. Not a lot, but a few foster homes, and lived with different people growing up. So he was kind of had some challenges. Rest in peace. And my father bought him the video cassette version of said album, and I was like, oh, one of the little precursors to heavy metal that I got into were two things. There was a Transformers the movie soundtrack, because I was obsessed with Transformers. Starscream's on the wall over there, and Bon Jovi Slippery When Wet, because that was the first time I played air guitar, one of the first times, other than Back to the Future. Pardon that short-term break. And what happened was that I wasn't really in there was a second incident on this thing called the Gravitron, which were these like carnivals, or like these not carnivals, fairs and stuff, fairgrounds and carnivals included. They had these things where it was like this disc that rotated around, and you would actually be stuck to the back. Back then, they didn't give a shit if you spun around. And Round and Round by Rat was probably the second air guitar I played on one of these Gravitron things. This ride that I took, because I used to play all the greatest hair metal in the late '80s in the Gravitron, because it was kind of fit that that kind of carnival or county fair kind of demographic that used to go to those types of things. So up until when I was 10 years old, I had wanted to be a scientist and inventor. I wanted to invent a time machine and go back in time and do all sorts of stuff. I was obsessed with time travel. And I wanted to learn science and stuff. I was really, I was really obsessed with that stuff. And I used to draw like graphics and like little shitty drawings and like journaling, like I wanted to do that. That's what I wanted to do when I grew up. Be a scientist and inventor. So it was about January 1989. My brother received a video cassette of Live After Death. It's like, oh, okay, whatever, It was skid music, that's what people called it, because skids were like the juvenile delinquents of the time. They smoked, or got girls pregnant in high school, or or did drugs or whatever, kind of the bad kids, right? So I was kind of wary of that. By that time, Iron Maiden kind of were starting to fade a little out, at that point. Thrash metal was coming in pretty hardcore. There was some other things though in the mix. There was this little thing called alternative, which was an umbrella term for a bunch of different styles, ranging from Jane's Addiction to Ministry. There was a lot of stuff coming out at that time. Even then, Red Hot Chili Peppers. So by 1990, what I'd been into was pretty much, I could go into more of this, but I'm trying to cover the 90s mainly, punk and metal. And I really liked DRI and Suicidal Tendencies, and I was, this was before Black Flag. And I saw a lot of kids wear these Misfits shirts. I was like, who's that? I wanted to get a shirt, even though I never had heard of the Misfits. But one of my friends, that was a little bit later, I believe. That was the summer of 1990. One of my friends, actually, I met up with for the first time since like earlier in elementary school. And we were walking down the street. We were both wearing Metallica shirts. I think this was my brother's Metallica shirt I was wearing. It was like the Damage Incorporated one or something. And he was wearing one too. Like, hey, how's it going? We've seen you for like 3 years or whatever. And the funny thing was, it was like we didn't really we didn't even talk to each other for 3 years, but we were both wearing Metallica shirts, ironically, on that same day when we just walked down the street. Turns out, he had got into metal and punk and stuff, and I had at the same time. We didn't even know. It was pretty awesome. Like later on, even in life, like a year and a half ago, he's like, "Oh, what have you been listening to?" Johnny Thunders and CBGB stuff. I'm like trying to get into stuff. That's my favorite one. And it's like turns out. Oh, where is that? Nah, I'm not gonna look for it. Turns out I was listening at the same time. It's like parallel universes, like not parallel, but aligned kind of unconsciously with the same style of music some of the time. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, but he'd also gotten into Iron Maiden by the time. He wasn't as into him because he wanted the chunkier guitar. And he was like sick of the whatever with Iron Maiden. But at that point in time, there was a shift happening with people, with kids, because with the delinquents or whatever, the working class, people that probably wouldn't have necessarily graduated from high school even without a GED or night school or whatever. And that was namely rap was starting to seep into that demographic of kid. So a lot of the metalheads that were ostensibly bullies for when I got into metal were starting to listen to more rap and starting to get out of the metal thing. And eventually what happened was metal became more, so it's still an outcast music, but slight more nerd edge to it than earlier, because all the bad kids started to listen to rap, I mean, that's what happened. And that was kind of 1990, was like that shift. The Black Album came out in 91, and, some of those kids retained that, or some of the preps got into that too. But that was kind of the beginnings of that. But my brother, who was at least at the time, rest in peace, far more successful with women than I was dating this college girl for, for all, his high school dropoutness. He was dating a girl that was into college. He was smooth, and this girl was kind of into some alternative stuff. So she turned him on to some like Pogues, or like, remember, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Jane's Addiction, stuff like that. And that was kind of the beginnings of like the 90s thing. Like, he was still into some of the stuff. He was still like Judas Priest, Of course, there was a story I won't mention in this installment about him and Judas Priest, which was kind of sad, but I think he changed his mind later. I'll tell you why later too. That's a little bit ahead, but he got into some of this stuff. He's like, oh, these new bands that are out, it was kind of cool. I kind of picked up on some of that, at the time. Red Hot Chili Peppers' Mother's Milk, good album, still probably one of their last goodish albums in my opinion, honestly. And Jane's Addictions, Nothing Shocking, come out. And, some of that stuff was coming out, some of the edgier stuff at the time. And there was this magazine, Musician Magazine, from 1991 that I actually rebought because I knew that this was like kind of historical document. If I could dig it out, I'll show you in this video, in a future video maybe. And it had Guns N' Roses on the cover. It's like the new wave of metal, and they talked about a few key bands that they like really hyped up: Wolfsbane, Soundgarden, Voivod, and Faith No More. They're like, this is the future of metal. Faith No More, Wolfsbane, Soundgarden, and Voivod, of all things. And I think later that year, or it was 91, maybe it was 90, winter of 90 or early 91, some of those bands toured together. And I almost went to the show because I had only heard one Voivod song, but I wanted to see the show because I'd see some of those videos. Astronomy Domine, the Pink Floyd cover on Headbangers Ball. I'd seen that, I'd be like, Voivod, that's some weird band. I want to see them. I don't even know what they are, but it's like cool, I don't even know what, I haven't heard more than one or two songs. And I never got to see that show, but I was like, if I would have gone to that show, that would have been historic. I'll be right back. That's the problem with cooking dinner when you're doing a video. But anyways, so I was going to see that show. Regret I never did, but it would have been an awesome show to see at the time. And I was into punk and metal, and see, the thing about punk and metal, there was crossover, the crossover thing, and a lot of the thing was like associated with skate culture. And I was a skater, believe it or not. I actually skated, and my father bought me, or was it my mother? I can't remember, a Veriflex skateboard, which was the crappy mall version, not the your corner skate shop that you go to with overpriced everything. It was, the cheaper version. But I'd gotten like the better accessories, like the bearings and the wheels. I think I got some monster balls or whatever, and forgot the trucks. But I could ollie too. As a little preteen teen, I could ollie a little bit. I got some tricks done. Who knows what it might have been if I would have just like kept going with skateboarding. But more on that at a later time. This is only covering those 2 years, 1991, 90 and 91. So I was into punk and metal, and I thought it was synonymous. I thought punk, metal, same thing. I thought it was the same thing. I thought it was like, not the same thing, but I was like, oh, it's like goth industrial. Like a lot of people are in this both. They like Skinny Puppy, and they listen to Sisters of Mercy or whatever. So that was kind of like the naivete that I had at the time. But yeah, the alternative thing was starting to think, there's also bands that were kind of on the real cutting edge that one of my friends had heard. And I saw a video on Headbangers Ball, and I was like, Oh my God, that's the craziest stuff ever. I don't know if that was 92 that I saw that, but 91. I was like, Sepultura, Creator, and Napalm Death. Like the heaviest things I had ever heard at the time on Headbangers Ball. So we all watched the Headbangers Ball, you know. We get together and you'd bring a friend over and you'd drink a 24 pack of Mountain Dew or Pepsi, stay up all night watching Headbangers Ball till 2 in the morning, you know, because it was Central Time. It was like 3 in the morning over in East Coast, but it was like it was a ritual, a weekly ritual. And my brother had done, he'd watched it, he taped it actually a bunch of times. Because sometimes what had happened, he'd actually had a life, you know, unlike me as a teenager. And he got laid, you know, went to this like, he had girlfriends too, like long-term girlfriends, but he, you know, I mean, you know, he was pretty good. I'm just saying, like at the time, you know, looked up to him, you know. But there was this bowling alley that he went to get laid. I know he did that. But he, you know, my friend came over. We watched Headbangers Ball on Saturday night. We'd watch his taped versions of it. You know, he'd be taping it. I taped it too sometimes. It was kind of a weekly ritual, and it was cool. And I think at the time, Adam Curry was still the main host. And I was like, Ricky Rackman never turned me off because, you know, I was a kid. You know, I didn't care about, you know, all these stupid things, but, you know. So there was this time that we were looking through his my brother's tape collection because he had like this tape case, and there was this little thing, like this little piece of metal that had this like weird tar on it. I smelled it, like, what is that? And it turns out it was a roach clip thing, but you know, at the time you don't really get it, you know, exactly. I mean, I pretty soon got what it was, but I'm just saying. So yeah, that was kind of the thing. And I used to bring kids from the neighborhood, though. My brother would throw these, he was on the second floor, he was living with my father. And after, you know, each conquest or his girlfriends or with his regular girlfriends too, there would be in the driveway, there'd be a pile of used condoms. And I used to bring the neighborhood kids to see this. It was just fun, you know, it's one of those things. But yeah, so that was kind of the first 2 years of the 90s, you know, by 7th grade, I was into the Misfits and Black Flag and Danzig, because my friend, you know, I mentioned that friend before that we had the Metallica shirts on. Well, it turns out he liked the Misfits. And I saw the Danzig video, Mother, on this thing called the Jukebox channel. And it was like this thing where you call in. It was like a public, it wasn't public access, but it was like this weird extra station you'd get sometimes with cable. And this Danzig video came out. I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. And he had the Misfits tape, or he had the Danzig tape, and I bought a Misfits tape, which was Earth AD. And I really liked it. And then I lent him that, and he lent me that, and that was kind of where the Danzig thing started with me. So anybody that watches Danzig is done can, you know, suck it, because, and doesn't, you know, thinks I don't know what I'm talking about because I, you know, 1990, you know, what can I say? So that was kind of the story of that. So with the regards to the, that was kind of a big thing too, was Danzig. Metallica was, you know, it was just like, it was like this weird, it was a weird time for metal, because hair metal was kind of just like too big to fail kind of thing. Like that was like the term I would use, that because like it was too big it was so big, you know, knew it was the bubble was gonna pop, you know, anytime, because all these fucking horrible hair ballads and stuff is awful. Like I like some of them now because I got learning more shred over the years, and like just in retrospect it looks better now compared to the crap that's out there now, especially in rock. But at the time it was like too much of that. So you knew something was going to happen. You knew there would be a backlash eventually, because every fucking 5 minutes you'd hear one of these horrible hair metal ballads. Some of them were good too, don't get me wrong. But so 1991, it was an interesting year because it was a transition. You know, NWA's, I'm not going to say the name of their album at the time because I don't want to fucking get in trouble. But, you know, that came out. say their second full-length album, just say put it like that. And then people were getting into that. People were getting into all this like rap, Ghetto Boys, and all this stuff. People that would be into like Metallica a year before. So it's kind of like, the main thing that bothers me about some of those people is the ones that weren't as fuck ups in life. If they got snooty, if they're more middle class ones, I'll just say it. They got snooty about their former metal love, you know, it's like, oh, fuck that. It's like, well, is this any better? You know, why are you a better person for listening to rap than metal? Fuck you, you know? So, but that was kind of 1990 and 91. And in the next installment, I will cover 1992, 93. And boy, those were some interesting years. That's all.